idea of the superempowered individual, where if I'm a coder, like, step one is like, I need to make sure that I really understand AI coding and like what that means and how coding is going to change in the future. I need to understand, specifically how to go from being a coder who writes code entirely by hand to being a coder who, orchestrates, a dozen instances of coding bots. There's a change in the actual job of coding itself, which is happening right now. But the other part of it is, okay, how do I become that super empowered individual? How do I become a coder that also then harnesses AI so that I can also be a great product manager and I can also be a great designer, right? And then the same thing for the product manager, which is how do I make sure that I can now use coding tools? How do I make sure I can also, do AI-based design? And the same thing for the designer, which is how do I use AI to also become a coder and also become a product manager? And then what you get is maybe those individual roles change. Like maybe those are not anymore sort of stovepipe roles of the way that they have been for the last 30 years or whatever. But what happens is the talented people in any of those roles become super empowered and they become good at doing all three of those things. And then those people become incredibly valuable because then those are people who can actually build and design new products right from scratch, which is like which is the most valuable thing. And so I think that's the opportunity.
So I love this answer. So what I'm hearing is essentially, if you're amazing at any of these three roles, you will do well.
Number one, if you're amazing at these roles, that's great. But also, part of being amazing at these roles is also being able to fully harness the new technology, right? So if you're a master coder today and you don't ever get to the point where you figure out how to use AI to leverage your coding skills, and do more, right? Like at some point you are going to hit an issue, right? Here's another way economists talk about this, which is there's the concept of the job, but the job is not actually the atomic unit of what happens in the workplace. The atomic unit of what happens in the workplace is the task. And so, and then what the way the economists think about it is a job is a bundle of tasks. And everybody wants to talk about job loss, but really what you want to look at is task loss, right? The tasks changing. I mean, the classic example of task changing. Classic example of task changing was once upon a time, executives never used typewriters or personal computers themselves, right? If you were a vice president of a company in 1970 or whatever, you did not have like a typewriter or a computer on your desk typing things. You had a secretary who you dictated memos to, right? And then there was this change where like email started to show up, and what would happen was the job of the secretary then went from the job of the secretary changed from sending out letters with stamps on them to like sending or receiving emails with the other admins. And then the secretary would print out the email and bring it into the executive's office. And the executive office would read the email on paper, scroll the reply, and give that message back to the secretary, who would go back and type it into the computer on his or her desk and send it as an email. Fast forward to today, none of that happens. Now executives just do all their own email. They still have secretaries or admins, but they're now doing different tasks. They're travel planning and orchestrating events and like doing all these other things, that the great admins do. And then the task set, ironically, of the executive has expanded to do actually more of the clerical work themselves, actually like sit there and like type their own memos, which again, 50 years ago, they never would have done that. And so the executive job still exists, the secretary job still exists, but the tasks have changed. And I think that's like a great example of what's going to happen in coding. The tasks are going to change. It's what's going to happen in product management. The tasks are going to change. Designer tasks are going to change. And so the job persists longer than the individual tasks. And then as the tasks change enough, then that's when the jobs change. And so at the level of an individual, you kind of want to think of like, okay, I have this job. The job is a bundle of tasks. I need to be really good at making sure that I can like swap the tasks out, right? I can really adapt, use the new technology, get really good at AI coding, for example. I can, and then you want to kind of add skills. I can also get really good at design. I can also get really good at product management because I've got this new tool. So you want to kind of pick up more and more scope as you do that. And then, 10 years from now, is your job title coder or coder designer product manager? Or is it just I build products? Or is it just I tell the AI how to build products? It's like whatever that job is called, who even knows what it's going to be? But it's going to be incredibly important because the people doing that job are going to be orchestrating the AI. And so that's the track that the best people are going to be on. And I think that's the thing to lean hard into.
I think people aren't fully grasping just specifically software engineering and how much that is changing. Like, it's pretty clear we're going to be in a world soon where engineers are not actually writing code, which I think a year ago we would not have thought. And now it's just clearly this is where it's heading. It's like there's going to be this artisanal experience of sitting there writing code, which is so crazy how much that job is going to change.
Yeah. So again, here I go back, and again, pardon maybe the history lesson, but like I go back like coding. So The first, you may know, do you know the original definition of the term calculator? Do you know what that referred to?
No.
It referred to people. Right. So back before there were like electronic calculators or computers or any of these things, the way that you would actually do computing, the way that you would do calculating, like the way that an insurance company would calculate actuarial tables, or the military would like calculate, I don't know, whatever troop logistics, formulas or whatever it was. The way that you would do it is you would actually have a room full of people. And by the way, these are like big rooms. You could have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people doing this. And you would actually figure out, somebody at the head of the room who was like responsible for like whatever the mathematical equation was. And then they would parcel out the individual mathematical calculations to people sitting at desks who were doing them all by hand. Right. And that job title was those people were calculators. Right. And so we've gone from a world in which you literally have people doing mathematical equations by hand. Then we got the first computers. The first computers, of course, didn't have programming languages. Right. They only had machine code. Right. So the first computers were programmed with ones and zeros. And so the task of the programmer became do the ones and zeros. And then that became punch cards. And you can still, there's still people, kicking, today who, whose job as a programmer was to like deal with the punch cards. And then you got actually this big breakthrough, which was called assembly language, which was basically the way to do machine code, but like with some level of like English kind of added to it. And then the best programmers did assembly language. And then, when I was coming up, it was higher level languages like C that compiled into machine code, and that's what programmers did. And then I still remember when scripting, when scripting languages, we developed JavaScript at Netscape, and then Python took off, and Perl and these other scripting languages. When scripting languages took off in the 2000s, there was this big fight in the technical community, which is scripting real programming or not, right? Because it's kind of cheating, right? Because real programmers write code that compiles to machine code. And like real programmers like do like memory management themselves, and they do all they get this whole craft of writing C code, and these JavaScript or Python programmers are just doing this kind of lightweight thing. It doesn't even really count as coding, and of course the answer is yes, it very much counted. And now most coding is done with the scripting languages, right? Which have you see my point. The scripting languages have abstracted away like 5 layers of detail underneath that people used to do by hand, and they don't anymore. And then to your point, like AI coding is the next layer on that. AI coding actually abstracts away the process of actually writing the scripting code, right? And so in one sense, this is a really big deal for all the obvious reasons. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, this is the next layer of the task redefinition under the job of programmer, right? Now, what's the job of the programmer? It's, to your point, it's not necessarily to write the code by hand. But what it is now is, all right, now, if you talk to the world's best programmers today, what they'll tell you is, oh, my job is I'm sitting there and I'm orchestrating 10 code bots, right? Coding bots that are running in parallel, right? And literally they sit there and they shift from browser to browser or terminal to terminal. And their day job now is kind of arguing with the AI bots to try to get them to like write the right code, right? And then debug it and fix the problems and change the spec and do all these things. And so now the job of the programmer is to argue with the coding bots. But like, if you don't know how to write the code yourself, you don't know how to evaluate what the coding bots are giving you, right? And so you asked about the 10, our 10-year-old is super into computers and super into programming, and what I'm telling and he's using Claude and ChatGPT, Copilot, and all these things. And what I'm telling him is like, look, and by the way, he loves vibe coding. He's on Replit all the time doing vibe coding, doing games. He's sitting there, it's hysterical, right? Because he's sitting there. It's a 10-year-old basically who's spends 2 hours at dinner arguing with an AI for fun, right? Right, but what I'm telling him is, no, look, you need to still fully understand and learn how to write and understand code, because the coding bots are giving you code. If it doesn't work, or if it's not doing what you expect, or it's not fast enough, or whatever, like you need to be able to understand the results of what the AI is giving you, right? In the same way that somebody who's writing scripting language code does need to understand ultimately how the microprocessor works. And so again, it's kind of this up leveling of capability where you actually want the depth to be able to go down and be able to understand what the thing is actually doing, even if you're not spending your day actually doing that by hand. And again, I look at that and I'm like, okay, now programmers are going to be 10 times or 100 times or 1,000 times more productive than they used to be, right? And that is overwhelmingly a good thing. The tasks are definitely changing. The nature of the job is changing. But are human beings going to be involved in the coding process and overseeing the AI coding and all that? And the answer is, of course, absolutely, 100%, like no question.
So you're in the camp of still learn to code, still a valuable skill.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, again, if you want to be one of these look, if you just want to put your like self in autopilot and like I can't be bothered and I'm just going to have AI write the code and it's going to generate whatever it does and that's fine. And I'm going to be, if the goal is to be a mediocre coder, then just let the AI do it. It's fine. The AI is going to be perfectly good at generating infinite amounts of mediocre code. No problem. It's all good. If the goal is I want to be one of the best software people in the world and I want to build new software products and technologies that like really matter, then yeah, you 100% want to still be, you want to go all the way down. You want your skill set to go all the way down to the assembly and machine code. You want to understand every layer of the stack. You want to deeply understand what's happening at the level of the chip, right, and the network and so forth. By the way, you also really deeply want to understand how the AI itself works, right? Because you want to, right? Because if people understand how the AI works, they're clearly able to get more value out of it than somebody who doesn't understand how it works. Right? I mean, you're always more productive if you know how the machine works, right? When you use the machine. And so, yeah, the super empowered individual on the other end of this that wants to do great things with the new technology, yes, you 100% want to understand this thing all the way down the stack because you want to be able to understand what it's giving you, right? And when something doesn't work or when something isn't right, you want to be able to really quickly understand why that is. By the way, again, this goes back to education. AI is your best friend at helping you learn all that, right? Because it's like, oh, I need to understand. I don't know, like this isn't fast enough. I need to figure out as a coder, I need to figure out how to do a different approach to memory management or something. And you can be like, well, shit, like I don't quite know how to do that. Okay, AI, let's spend 10 minutes. Teach me how to do this, right? Teach me what this all means, right? So all of a sudden you have this like incredibly synergistic relationship with the AI where it's also helping you get better at the same time that it's doing a lot of work for you.
By the way, I was going to say, I was a big Perl programmer. I was an engineer for 10 years, and that was my language of choice.
Do you remember? I don't know when you were doing it, but do you remember that at least early on? Do you remember? Did you ever hit this where like C coders were like looking down their nose at you, being like,
for sure. It's like this is so slow. It's not going to scale. What are you spending all your time on this thing?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, and again, it was sort of this thing where they were sort of correct, which is at the beginning it wasn't fast enough or whatever. By the end, they were definitely wrong, right? Which is it got much better, much faster, and it swept the world. Most coding today happens in scripting languages. And then, by the way, the people along the way, the people who really understood the scripting languages and the people who understood all the lower level systems, they were the ones who were able to actually make the scripting languages actually work really well, right? And so that was a great example of this kind of adaptation. And then again, the result of that was a far higher number of people writing code with scripting languages than were ever writing code with lower level languages. And I think this will just kind of be a more dramatic version of that.